माननीय जयराम रमेश जी।
पेपर ले लो, सभी पेपर ले लो, 8 मिनट था ना।
Sir, when I was growing up,
ले लो, इसी में छेड़ दे।
there used to be a very famous Hindi film song. And I was reminded of this as I finished listening to the Honorable Finance Minister. सब कुछ सीखा हमने, ना सीखी होशियारी. And I thought to myself, सब कुछ सीखा हमने, ना सीखी होशियारी, सब कुछ सिखाया आपने, ना पहचानी बीमारी. And what is this bimari, sir? This is a peculiar bimari. For 70 years, we have gone through bouts of bimari. Bimari has come because of food shortages. Bimari has come because of foreign exchange shortages. Bimari has come because of oil price hikes. Bimari has come because of double-digit astronomical inflation. None of these symptoms are present today. And yet we are in a stage of bimari. And I thought that the budget, while taking credit for the foreign exchange reserves, for the food production, for the single-digit inflation, would at least recognize what ails the Indian economy today. And I am sorry to say, sir, that the fundamental diagnosis of the ills of the economy was absent throughout the budget speech. So I was in Bombay day before yesterday, and in Nariman Point, there is a very famous hoarding that used to be put up by Nana Chutsama, one-liner hoardings, which summarizes the feelings of the day. And on Friday, I saw the hoarding, the budget, strong on length, weak on strength. And I think that is a very good summary of what this budget is. Over 2 hours of the speech, but the fundamental malaise of the Indian economy is not addressed. And I will explain why, sir. So first of all, my sympathies are entirely with the finance minister, because over the past few years, budgets, the importance of budgets has been declining. We tend to give far too much importance to budgets, whereas in real world, the importance of budgets is not as great as it is made out to be. So in the last 3 years, the 3 big dhamaka announcements have all been outside the budget. Demonetization was outside the budget. GST, while it was mentioned in the budget, the implementation was outside the budget. And the corporate tax cuts recently announced in September before Howdy Modi in Houston was outside the budget. So finance minister's position is always a very tricky position, because ultimately the prime ministers can take the thunder away out of the budget, and this is what has happened. The importance of the budget has actually declined. So it's also true that over a period of time, multiple interest groups converge to demand things from the budget, and the finance minister's role is to intermediate the demands that come from different sources, both within government and outside government, keeping in view what the economic situation is. And therefore, my sympathies are entirely with the finance minister. It's not an easy job. It's the most difficult job in any government. And all budgets since 1947, sir, have been exercises in creative accounting, and this budget is also no exception. So what is the fundamental problem in India today as far as the economy is concerned? We don't have foreign exchange shortages. We don't have food shortages. We don't have double-digit inflation. We don't have galloping oil price. We don't have a weak government. We have a very strong government, and yet we have seen 6 consecutive quarters of GDP growth decline. GDP is not declining. GDP growth rate is declining. The most important reason why the GDP growth rate has declined is because investment rates are declining. Investment is not declining. Investment rate is declining. It's very important to make this distinction. Investments are rising, but the rate of investment expressed as a proportion of GDP is falling. Now, growth comes from investment. Investment comes from savings. And sir, the most serious problem in India today, which is unrecognized in the budget, is that savings rates are falling in India. We always used to take pride in the fact that India is a poor country, but our savings rate is very high. So India is now a middle-income country, low middle-income country, but our saving rates are falling. If savings rates fall, investment rates fall. If investment rates fall, GDP growth rate falls. And I would urge the finance minister to please pay attention to the central feature of the Indian economic malaise today, which is a fall in savings rates. These are not savings of governments, these are not savings of private companies, these are household savings. This has never been as low as they are today, and it is a matter of deep concern that this has been left unrecognized in the budget. So the finance minister said that this is an aspirational budget. So taking inspiration from the chairman, this is not an aspirational budget, it's a perspirational budget. And I'll tell you why it is a perspirational budget. Because it is based on a series of assumptions. I wish the Honorable Finance Minister luck. If these assumptions hold good, her budget is implemented. But the question we have to ask today, how realistic are these assumptions? In the light of what has happened in the last 2 to 3 years, is the Finance Minister justified in making these assumptions? So she is assuming a growth rate in tax revenues which is not borne out by experience. She is assuming a growth in disinvestment revenues that is not borne out by experience. The entire budget hinges on raising 210,000 crores, 210,000 crores from disinvestment, largely from LIC and IDBI. The budget assumes 133,000 crores as telecom spectrum charges coming to the government. These are all valid assumptions. But the question is, are these realistic assumptions? And based on what we have seen, I think, sir, these assumptions, the finance minister is perfectly justified in making them, but they simply fly in the face of what we have seen in terms of actual practice. This increasing resort to the use of nominal GDP as an indicator worries me, sir, and it should worry the finance minister. We always talk of real GDP, which means GDP adjusted for inflation. But now we are talking of nominal GDP. So you can have 4% real GDP, 8% inflation, and that will be 10%, 12% nominal GDP. But you can also have 8% real, 4% inflation, and 12% nominal. So the question, therefore, is not nominal GDP, but what is the composition of this GDP? And I think there, this budget has left a lot to be desired. The nominal GDP growth amongst the lowest in 42 years, this year, is 7.5%, and the finance minister is assuming that this will increase to 10% in the coming year. I don't see what the basis of that optimistic assumption is. So the basic point I wish to make is the credibility of these assumptions. See, she is assuming a revenue buoyancy of 1.2. She is assuming that income tax rates, GST collections, customs duty collections will increase at 10% and over. But in view of what has happened in recent years, I think these assumptions, again, sir, are very, very unrealistic. So I think it's one thing to have aspirations, but another thing is to predicate those aspirations on assumptions which simply do not have any relation to reality. And this, to my mind, sir, is the single biggest problem with this budget. It is based on assumptions that are simply not valid, which are, they are valid assumptions, but they are not credible or realistic assumptions. Sir, two big ideas in this budget that I want to address. I could see that this budget is based on massive privatization. And I believe, sir, that this is detrimental to the economy in the long run. This is not going to be LIC, this is not going to be Jeevan Bima Nigam, it will be Budget Bima Nigam. And if we are going to start opening the doors of an IPO as far as LIC is concerned, I don't know where we are headed. In any case, sir, LIC, 3 acts have to be amended by both houses, so we will have a debate on the IPO of the LIC, but I wish to draw the attention of the House to the dangerous implications of making a budget dependent on the IPO of the LIC. There is also privatization of BPCL. There is privatization of strategic companies. And I think, sir, this again is a danger call for the government and for the country. So there is absolutely no provisioning in this budget for recapitalization of banks. There is absolutely no mention of how much money the budget will give to recapitalize banks. But we know that the banks need money. Does this mean that the banks are going to go to the market? And I want to say, sir, that privatization can be of 2 kinds. Open privatization and hidden privatization. This is hidden privatization. You are telling the banks, I'm not going to give you money for recapitalization, go and raise it from the market. With the values of the banks being what they are not going to be able to raise it from the market. The only way they can raise it from the market is for government to reduce its equity to below 50%. Is that what the government is proposing? If you want to do it openly. Why this backhanded way of privatizing? So I believe, sir, this entire privatization philosophy of the government is deeply, deeply dangerous and should worry all of us. The second dependence in this budget is on foreign investment. Sir, I am amazed that a party that criticized 1991 reforms for opening the doors to foreign investment is today opening the door even more on the assumption that foreign investment is going to bail out the Indian economy. Sir, no economy in the world, including China, has grown on the strength of foreign investment. It is domestic investment that drives the economy. If domestic investors are unhappy, foreign investors are unlikely to be happy. So FDI, as I have said before, and I don't mind repeating it, FDI should be not foreign, it should be replaced by DI, which is domestic investment. And if the domestic investment is not forthcoming, growth is not going to be forthcoming. Which brings me, sir, to my last point. Why is domestic investment so sluggish? Investments are increasing, but investment rates are not increasing. And if we are aspiring to be a $5 trillion economy, and I hope all those who speak of 5 trillion recognize and remember the number of zeros in that 5 trillion, because I laugh when many people tell me $5 trillion economy. Trillion is not even an Indian concept. Trillion is an American concept. We don't even know. We don't use words like billion and trillion in India. But today, 5 trillion is trying to become a household word. I take the government for what it is. But if we are going to be on a $5 trillion economy, sir, we have to raise the level of investment to something like 34 or 35% of GDP. It's now hovering at about 25 or 26% of GDP. Why are investment rates falling? And I think the most important point to recognize is that sentiment is very negative today. So what is sentiment? Sentiment is psychology. Why are people not coming forward to invest? You have a strong government, you have a strong prime minister, you have foreign exchange reserves, you have no food shortages, you don't have double-digit inflation, so why aren't people investing? And in my view, sir, people are not investing because of 4 words. F-E-A-R. They're not investing because of fear. They're afraid of taxmen, they're afraid of tax laws, they're afraid of discretionary powers with government institutions, and people are sitting on cash mountains, and they would rather prefer to sit on cash than they would actually invest. So I think the real issue of the economy which needs to be addressed is investor sentiment, is investor confidence. And why that confidence is not there, why that sentiment is so negative, is something that the finance minister must pay attention to. So there are two more points and I'll finish. There is a simplification of the direct taxes. So this is the first time I'm seeing a simplification through complication. It's a simplification through complication. It took me a lot of time to understand. The basic principle is very simple. You remove all the exemptions, you have a low tax rate. It's an unexceptionable philosophy. Remove all exemptions and settle for a low tax rate. But sir, the way it has been done, into my layman's mind, when you have 5 slabs and you bring it down to 3 slabs, that is simplification. 5 slabs going to 7 slabs is complication. It's very simple. So what has been attempted in the name of simplification is complication. It would lead to increased employment amongst chartered accountants. They will be the biggest beneficiaries of this move in the budget. But I hope that the finance minister, the roadmap that she has announced in the budget, which is lower taxes, no exemptions, that remains the watchword as we move ahead on this road to lower taxes. So the finance minister has also claimed credit for transparency. Yes, it is true that off-budget borrowings are being reflected explicitly for the first time in the budget, and I welcome that. But, sir, when you can't compare allocations of this year with expenditure of the previous year in a budget document, that is not transparency. When you read pages and pages of budget documents and you can't make any sense of whether allocations have fallen with respect to revised estimates or budget estimates of the previous year, so that is not transparency. And I would request the Honorable Finance Minister, if you really want to make budgets transparent, there is only one way of making budgets transparent, which is to move from the cash system to the accrual system of accounting. 75 countries in the world have moved from the cash system of accounting to the accrual system of accounting. You have bit the GST bullet, you have bit the demonetization bullet, bite this bullet as well, and you will see that there will be a considerable transparency that will be forthcoming as far as budgets are concerned. So finally, sir, I don't want to be too critical of the budget because I know the limitations under which budgets are prepared, but I do want to end by saying that the states have got a raw deal. We are the Council of States, and we should be concerned that systematically states in India are being asked to bear the losses, and when there are gains, they accrue to the center. 50% of the losses are borne by the states, 30% of the gains accrue to the states. So this is an untenable proposition. I raised this in a 0 hour last week that the government announced 42% of all gross tax revenues will be devolved to states. We welcomed it. It was a game changer, as the Prime Minister called it. But I want to ask the Honorable Finance Minister, in this year, how much gross tax revenue has been devolved to states? It's 30%. It's not 42%. In the last 3 years, how many gross tax revenues are devolved to states? It's not 42%, it's 35%. So I think the states are going to get squeezed, and sir, with the recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission likely in October, the states are going to get even further squeezed, because one of the terms of reference which has been given, very dangerous terms of reference, the government has asked the Finance Commission to recommend setting aside money for defense and internal security separately, and only after that the money will get devolved to the states. This was done without consultation with the states. This was done without any debate in the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. So the states are going to face a far more difficult position from next year onwards, once the full report of the Finance Commission is going to be forthcoming. So if you want to build a $5 trillion economy, you have to have strong states. You have to have strong state finances, but the direction, I'm afraid, is completely in the opposite way. So with these few words, I wish to say once again that the budget is very long, is very detailed, is very aspirational, but whether it's realistic or whether it is credible, time alone will tell. And I can only wish the Honorable Finance Minister luck that the assumptions that she has made actually will hold out. I believe they will not. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.